It all started with a simple text message from an unknown number, a number that had been blowing up my phone for weeks, trying to get my attention. I had a pretty good idea of who the text was from, which is why I planned on ghosting them until they got the hint. But after that text, I knew that I couldn't ignore them anymore. It wasn't just the caption underneath that read, "I tried to warn you." It was the attachment that came with it. A picture of my husband, Thomas, with another woman. For the last couple of weeks, everything had been so good between Thomas and I. We were married for years, but recently decided to take a massive change in our relationship. We were your regular, blissful couple, holding hands when we were out and about, the little cutesy feeding each other at dinner, and staying up all night to binge-watch shows while wrapped up in a blanket. It seemed like everything was going perfect, except for one problem: the unknown caller that kept popping up on my phone. Well, to say that they were unknown would probably be a lie. I had an excellent idea of who it was. You see, about a month ago, I had to break it off with someone I was seeing, named Fiona. Fiona and I were seeing each other for a little over a year. I know how it sounds, but I had really fallen hard for her in a very short time. Of course, I'm not making excuses for what I did, but I just want you to understand a little more about why I did it. Fiona was special. From the start, we clicked, and I was open about my marriage, which she understood. However, during our time together, we grew deep bonds. Bonds deep enough that at one point I decided to call it quits with her. I was getting too emotionally involved with her. I knew where this was going and decided to walk away, but after a while, we reconnected. She was like the friend that I always wanted, and an attraction that I couldn't let go of. We would go shopping together, out to dinner, and even talk about our personal lives and how they were going. Fiona was like a confidant, but no matter how much I cared for her, there was a pain that lingered in me about what I was doing to Thomas. I knew what I was doing wasn't right. I wanted to remain friends with Fiona, but having her around was a temptation that I couldn't take. So, even though it was hard, I broke it off with her completely. She didn't take it well. She became defensive, telling me that Thomas wasn't good enough for me, and that she knew I was making a mistake. I didn't want to hear her, so I just turned and left. That didn't stop her from calling and texting. Fiona blew up my phone constantly. She'd send text messages all through the night and call me all through the day. It got so bad that I had to turn the vibration off of my phone to get some peace. But when she wouldn't stop, I decided that ignoring her wasn't going to do anything. So I blocked her number from my phone. I guess you can call it naive to think that doing this would send a message, because that's when the unknown callers started making an appearance. After a couple of weeks and a few blocked numbers, I stopped receiving phone calls and text messages from her. I figured maybe she got the message and moved on. Then the picture messages came, and my world was turned upside down, which led me there, staring down at my phone with a hitch in my throat, not believing my eyes. Because not only was Thomas in the photo, but the other woman was Fiona. I didn't know what the heck was going on. It felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what was real. This could all be a plot from Fiona, a photoshopped picture sent to make me lose control and accuse Thomas of something that he didn't do. So, before anything else, I knew the first step that I had to take. I had to talk to Thomas. I went down the stairs and saw him sitting on the couch, watching TV. I wanted to confront him so bad, but I decided to play it cool and see would he tell me the truth. I sat down beside him and started up a casual conversation. Eventually, I asked him about what he was up to lately and how was his night out with friends. He was all smiles, putting his arm around me and told me about his nights with his friends, telling me it was nothing special and how he'd rather be home with me. Just by looking at him, I felt like I had nothing to worry about. So I pushed everything to the side. I wanted desperately to just move on from the situation. But later that evening, I received a phone call from Fiona. I was determined to tell her off, to lay into her for making me that way. That's what I wanted to do, but it didn't take long for her to tear the anger right out of me, replacing it with something else. Doubt. She told me how she still loved me, and that she only wanted to prove that Thomas couldn't be trusted. She told me that she was sorry for what she did, and how she was so hurt about how things ended with us, that she wasn't thinking. I started to scold her and let her know that I didn't believe the pictures, but then she went into descriptions of things that only a person who was intimate with Thomas would know. With each word that she said, I could feel my resolve starting to crack. Tears were forming at the corners of my eyes. I could feel every piece of my heart crumble in my chest. After that phone call, it was like I couldn't see straight anymore. Days seemed to pass in a blur, with me running on autopilot. I would wake up in the morning, get dressed for work, and would barely say 2 words to Thomas before I was out the door. When I got home, we would eat dinner together, but it was like we were so far apart from each other. I couldn't get Fiona's words out of my head, and I couldn't see Thomas the same way either. The way we were acting with each other was so different from how we used to that Thomas tried to cheer me up in his usual style, but when he did, it just made me even angrier. He came up to me one day while I was sitting in the living room reading a book. He hung around and started making jokes. Still, every time that I heard his voice and how cheerful he sounded, I began to think about the picture. So I lashed out at him in a way that I never did before. I called him all kinds of names and told him that I couldn't trust him anymore. The confusion was visible on his face as he wondered what was going on with me. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed him the pictures. Each one that I swiped through brought a new expression on his face. He went from confused to shocked, then back to confused in a matter of seconds. He tried to explain to me that he had no idea who Fiona was and didn't remember the night that those photos were taken. He then tried to tell me that he must have been extremely drunk and how he was sorry. I screamed at him that that's not an excuse before I turned on my heels and stormed away. I didn't even want to look him in the face anymore. As far as I was concerned, the conversation was over. Time passed, and we were basically strangers living under the same roof. We didn't talk to each other when we passed by, and barely gave each other a second glance. The only conversation that we would make was a curt goodbye in the morning. I could feel myself going from angry to depressed. I didn't know what to do anymore in my life. I didn't know if I wanted to be in the relationship with Thomas anymore either. Yes, I still loved him, but it was starting to feel pointless. I guess I didn't really know if he cared. However, that was put to a rest a few days later when Thomas came to me with a surprise. He told me that he made a mistake and that he wanted to make it up to me any way he could. At that point, I didn't really feel as though there was anything left to lose. I was at the end of contemplating divorce, so I figured I would give it one last shot before I made the plunge. Thomas recreated our first date together. It was a big romantic gesture and his way of saying that he wanted to start over from the beginning. To be honest, I didn't know if that's what I wanted. We went to the park and had a picnic, spending the day just relaxing in the sun, talking about everything that we were feeling and how we wanted to make things better between us. He surprised me even more by taking me to the carnival. I could tell that he was really trying, so why couldn't I stop thinking about him and Fiona together? For the next couple of weeks, we started to get back to our old selves. We were happy and living life as a married couple like we always wanted, or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. I hadn't talked to Fiona since she sent me that last message, asking for my forgiveness. I still had all of her texts and voicemails on my phone, so I figured it was time to put everything behind me. I typed in the code for my voicemail box and went through the messages, thinking that even hearing her voice would infuriate me, but I was wrong. When I played her first message, I realized that I missed her voice. It had been so long since we last spoke, and even longer since I felt that way. I remembered the days I would wake up, knowing that I would be seeing Fiona later. It was like a wave of nostalgia washed over me. I couldn't help but laugh at myself as I listened to and deleted her messages. Then I went to the texts, and the smile was washed away. Looking at the photo now didn't fill me with anger, but with sadness. I always thought that I was mad at Fiona for what she did, but I wasn't. Then I started to believe that it was Thomas I was angry at, but that wasn't true either. So why was I sitting, staring at a picture that I didn't want to see with tears rolling down my cheek? That's when it hit me. I realized that I was feeling something that I hadn't felt for many years. Jealousy. I missed Fiona. And when I saw that picture of her with Thomas, it broke my heart. I felt bad for cheating on Thomas, so I broke it off with Fiona to make it right. But honestly, I didn't want to admit the truth. I wanted to be with Fiona. Every day that I pretended to be happy with him, I was hoping to hear from her. That's why I didn't change my number or cut her off completely. I was so wrapped up in my thoughts that I didn't hear Thomas walk in. He saw me staring at the picture and tried to apologize again. I got up and gave him a hug before sitting him down beside me. I knew I needed to explain to him how I felt, and I didn't know how he would take it. We started talking, and it seemed to go on for hours. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, absorbing the revelation, and other times we'd move from sitting to pacing to leaning on the wall. By the end, we both knew that our marriage was ending. But for me, there was one more thing that I had to do. I unblocked Fiona's phone and sent her a text, letting her know that I accepted her apology and that I wanted to meet to talk about what happened. So later that week, we met up. Sitting at a restaurant that we went to many times before, I could see that Fiona was a little anxious, but for me, I was just happy to see her. We started with small talk, asking how each other was doing and about any new changes. We shared little laughs until an awkward silence fell over the table. That's when it just flowed out of me. I explained to Fiona everything that I realized and apologized for putting her through so much drama. I didn't know how she would take my confession, so when she just sat there staring at me, I knew that I unloaded too much. Then she laughed. I was shocked at first. I didn't know what was going on. She told me that it was certainly a lot to take in and very unexpected. But when the laughter faded, she said how her feelings never changed about me, and I could feel the weight lifted from my shoulders. It was like I was floating on air when she reached over and rested her hand on mine. I didn't know what the future held for us or what this meant about me, but I do know that I was happier than I had been for a long time. Did you like my story? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more.